I have suspicions that some of the claims I make in Always a Bigger Fish, that conservatism isn't at its core about fiscal responsibility, limited government, or the rights of the individual, but is about maintaining social hierarchies, that it believes people are fundamentally unequal and likes the free market because it sorts people according to their worth, and even softly implies capitalism itself may be innately anti-democratic, might raise some eyebrows. So I'm gonna show my work on this one. Two of the architects of conservative thought were Edmund Burke and Joseph de Maistre, who formulated much of their political theory while writing about the French Revolution. They, in turn, were influenced by earlier writings from Thomas Hobbes on the English Civil War. And what all three of these men were doing in writing about these wars was defending the monarchy. The sentiment that the masses should be powerless in the face of nobility was being challenged. And while these men thought the revolutionaries themselves were actually quite compelling, the democracy they were fighting for, Hobbes, Burke, and de Maistre found repulsive. Come the end of the revolution, when it seemed democracy might actually spread across Europe, Burke especially began to hypothesize ways that one's position within the aristocracy might be preserved even should the monarchy fall. He turned his eye to the market. So, okay, around the cusp of the 19th century, the prevailing economic theories were those of Adam Smith, who championed what's called the labor theory of value, which I don't super want to get into because there's like a billion videos about it already, but really briefly, if you take materials out of the ground and turn them into useful goods, it is that labor that makes the good more valuable than the raw material. And when someone buys that good, they cover the cost of the materials plus the value your labor has added to them. In contrast with this, what Burke argued was, well, a lot of nebulous things, but among them that, in fact, when a person of means buys a good, that, rather than the moment the good is produced, is when value is bestowed upon it. Value is not dictated by the producer, but by the consumer. Now there's like 2 centuries of argument about this. We're not going to dig into it all, but obviously this is in some sense true. If the people with money don't want to buy a good at a certain price, eventually the price will come down. So price is not solely dictated by labor. But what Burke does is claim that price and value are the same thing. No one ever gets cheated, no one ever gets a good deal. Whatever the buyer pays for the thing, that's what the thing is worth. Your labor is only as valuable as the degree to which it satisfies the desires of the moneyed classes. This was Burke's nod to the fact that, within capitalism, the wealthy held outsized influence, being that the more money you had, the more value you could dictate. And he argued that this was moral, that the wealthy deserved this influence. Burke was, by the way, wealthy. Sort of. He had a royal pension. What he felt the French Revolution revealed was not that oppressive nobility was bad, but that France must have just had the wrong nobles, because a proper aristocracy wouldn't have been overthrown. The problem was, as we've discussed, not the hierarchy itself, but the wrong people being in power. The revolution had taught him that perhaps power should not come by birthright. Perhaps we needed a system whereby those deserving of power could prove their worth. This should ideally be war, but capitalism would suffice. The structure of royalty would continue to exist, simply derived by different means, because the structure of democracy, where on election day the nobleman has no more power than the commoner, was, to an aristocrat, profane. What the structure needed was some tinkering to make it democracy-proof. So that's Burke. Over the next century, democracy did, in fact, spread across Europe, and Burke's, and several others, theories of value were picked up and iterated on in what came to be known as the Marginal Revolution, by economists Karl Menger, Stanley Jevons, and this Valjean-looking motherfucker Leon Walras. Marginalism amped up the idea that it is a good's utility to the consumer, and not the worker's labor, that gives it value, which confers a unique power upon those with money. and brought this thinking into a post-monarchical world. Their theories became especially popular when people realized they could be used to rebut Marxism. Jevons was taught all over Europe, and Menger became core to the Austrian school. And by the time we get to the Austrians, this mass of theories has, somewhere after Burke and before Hayek, coagulated into what we know of today as conservatism. These are among the most influential thinkers in conservative thought, and they're in a direct lineage with Burke and de Maistre. Now, while Burke is called the father of modern conservatism, these boys are not the alpha and omega of early conservative thought. But their ideas helped form the basis of conservatism and have never gone away. If you can point to some paradigm shift in the history of conservatism where the royalist sentiments of Edmund Burke and Joseph de Maistre were rooted out, I'd love to hear about it, because I listen to the thinkers championed by conservatives throughout the ages, and I keep hearing the same thing, that humans are innately unequal, and society flourishes when power is doled out to the deserving. Friedrich Nietzsche was not a conservative, but was deeply influential on the early marginalists, and he claimed the purpose of society was to produce the handful of great men who created everything that made life worth living, believing, quote, "Only the most intellectual of men have any right to beauty, to the beautiful. Only in them can goodness escape being weakness." James Fitzjames Stephen, who wrote a book-length rebuttal against early progressivism, believed, quote, "To obey a real superior, to submit to a real necessity and make the best of it in good part, is one of the most important of all virtues, a virtue absolutely essential to the attainment of anything great and lasting." Hayek and Schumpeter believed, respectively, that, quote, "The freedom that will be used by only one man in a million may be more important to society and more beneficial to the majority than any freedom that we all use," and, quote, "What may be attained by industrial or commercial success is still the nearest approach to medieval lordship possible to modern man." He's saying it's a good thing, by the way. Need I mention Ayn Rand's belief that, quote, "The man at the top of the intellectual pyramid contributes the most to all those below him, but gets nothing except his material payment. The man at the bottom, who left to himself would starve in his hopeless ineptitude, contributes nothing to those above him, but receives the bonus of all their brains." The godfather of neoconservatism, Irving Kristol, echoing Burke's yearning for a good war, felt the hierarchy should extend beyond the borders of a single country, believing, quote, "What's the point of being the greatest, most powerful nation in the world and not having an imperial role?" And modern conservatives love the natural hierarchies of Jordan Peterson, who believes, quote, "We keep behaving as though conservatism's disdain for equity isn't there, or, if it is, that it's new. But it's been there since the beginning. Conservatism upholds the status quo and defends the powerful, first from democracy, then from communism, now from social justice. Conservatism has rallied every time a movement has tried to share power with the disadvantaged. They were against same-sex marriage, they were against giving women the vote, they were against freeing slaves. Note, I said conservatives, not Republicans. Do your research. Conservatives say we are the party of measured steps, of caution, of evolution over revolution. And that's usually just before they say, but now is the time for swift, decisive action. Most every Republican claims to be a break with tradition. This time, we're gonna flip the script, bend the rules, outspend Democrats, invade your privacy, and start a war with no exit strategy. And that's what they've always said. All that changes is which continent the war is on. I'm not going to say the slow, stodgy conservative doesn't exist, but it has never typified the party. Rhetorically, it's a character they bring out to contrast themselves with whenever they need to rally their reactionary base. They tell us that's what their party is like, and we just take their word for it. I don't feel the need to pretend that just because most democracies have a left wing and a right wing, that both are equally valid and moral. There is no rule that proves this. There's only the liberal sentiment that saying otherwise is poor sportsmanship, a standard the right does not hold itself to. Conservatism is a reactionary politics that has at best mixed feelings about democracy, where my biggest issue with liberalism is that it's ill-equipped to deal with the problem of conservatism and does not fully commit to its own democratic principles. I'm going into all of this not because I want to stick it to the people who insist I don't research my videos, although I a little bit do, but because we can't talk about the alt-right if we keep portraying them as a break with the conservative tradition. They are the conservative tradition, only more. There's nothing they believe that conservatives don't have a long history of being sympathetic towards. They're just usually more ambivalent about it. As I've said before, this is ultimately my interpretation of history, and while many experts agree with me, I am not an expert. But I do my homework. So, tell you what, I've made a post on Tumblr listing all the books, essays, and documentaries I'm consuming for this series, the ones I have lined up, the ones I've completed, and some notes on what I've found valuable in them. I'm going to treat this as a living document and add to it as the work continues. Not that the people who say I just make shit up ever read the show notes, but I will keep a link in the show notes of every video, so if you want to check my work or research alongside me, you can do that. I have also live tweeted several books, including the primary source for this and the previous video, The Reactionary Mind by Corey Robin, under the hashtag Ian live tweets his research. So if you want a play-by-play of an entire book complete with my own observations, that's where you can find it. So far, in addition to Robin, I've done Bob Altemeyer's The Authoritarians, Jason Stanley's How Propaganda Works, and one weird essay on Lara Croft I did for the Fury Road video. If you want to read more about the history of conservative philosophy, in addition to The Reactionary Mind, I recommend No Law for the Lions and Many Laws for the Oxen is Liberty by Elizabeth Sandifer in the essay collection Neo-Reaction: A Basilisk. Elle recently got some grief from Nazis, so maybe consider buying her excellent book. Going forward, if anyone comments that I clearly don't know anything about conservatism, I hope you will stand with me in not taking them too seriously unless they demonstrate having done at least some research. Because I do mine.